So we're going to talk about how not to be taken advantage of. And this was actually a trigger for me. It happened recently where I was in a situation, felt totally taken advantage of. Mm-hmm. And so I was deconstructing it with Max. And I always love how Max offers a clear perspective and deconstructs everything. So I thought this would be a really great Facebook Live where Max can share his wisdom about what is underneath being taken advantage of. What is that really all about? So take it away.
Oh. Well, did you want to share an example or?
People can be taken advantage of all the time. In business and friendships and relationships where the energy is uneven, one person is, the energy's out of balance. The giving and receiving is out of balance. Yeah.
So yeah, the experience of being taken advantage of, that particular feeling and energy, is something that occurs whenever you are sharing an experience with someone and there's a particular agreement that you both come together and agree upon, either spoken or unspoken, and then there is a imbalance or what feels like
or a violation of the agreement,
right? Something that feels like you've been maybe wronged, or maybe you feel like there's something's come out of balance, basically, is the idea with that experience. And so what occurs in that particular engagement of energy is that whenever you've come into this agreement, you've extended part of your energy, right? But if you've not clearly defined the agreement, then what can occur is a particular movement of that energy in the agreement, right? So let's say an example would be that you're going to meet someone somewhere for lunch or something, right? And so you meet them up for lunch, and you never spoke about who's going to pay for lunch, right? And so you get to the end of the meal, and they're like, oh, I had a great time. And, you were the one that invited them out to lunch, so they just figured that you were going to pay for them. And all of a sudden, you're in a situation where you feel like you're being taken advantage of, whether or not that was the person's intention, right? Because there wasn't a clear defining of that part of the agreement, right?
That's a good example.
And so this situation, it feels like it's being leveraged against you, right? So there's this feeling of your energy, because your energy's in this agreement, is being leveraged against you, and that's very uncomfortable, right? Now, there's other experiences where, let's say you showed up and you agreed, to split the meal evenly, right? And the person's just like, I'm not going to do this, right? So they're just like bluntly just bailing, right? So that's a sort of different expression and experience where it's more of a forceful sort of, how do you say, like jumping out of the agreement. Right?
Yeah, violation. It's a violation of the agreement.
Right, which is different than being taken advantage of. Right? So taking advantage of always is about your energy being leveraged against you in your own agreement.
And the only way that can happen is if you extend your energy outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. So what you would call energetic reaching. Right.
And so this comes back into, the experiences of judgment, experiences of being wronged, right? So that's the dynamic of that energy. And you have to put some form of your vital life force in that to be leveraged against you to experience that. Whereas if, you're just showing up and the person's like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, and you haven't put any of your vital life force into it, you're just like, okay, and you just part ways.
Part ways amicably.
Right? So that's the difference, is the extension of your energy into it, right?
And that's also having to do with how you value yourself. Because if you're not valuing yourself, you just kind of put yourself out there, and, you know, people will take as much as you give. But if you value yourself, you're going to say, okay, here's the agreement that we have together. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I expect of you. These are the expectations of how we interact.
Yeah. And so those are sort of examples and balances of all those kinds of scenarios and situations. Another one that comes up for people is when someone projects an agreement and then just sort of leaves you in an awkward situation, and it's like, well, what do you do, right? So an example is like, you know, you are at some event, and after the event, everyone's cleaning up, right? And then all of a sudden, a person's like, hey, I'm going to leave you to clean up for me. I'm going to go out with my friend, see ya, and they just run out the door, right? You never agreed to any of that. So what do you do? Right? So this is sort of the taken advantage of.
Social implications that come into play with this one. Right.
So this actually plays on a different agreement, which is how were you agreeing to show up for the event, right? So if your agreement is to only clean up what you've brought to the event, then that's it. And you either choose to extend your energy further and clean up after someone else, or you don't. And you have that boundary defined again, right? So it's a second agreement playing on the first in this taking advantage of situation. Whereas if you so if you did agree to clean up, you know, whether or not it was something that you brought, then that would feel like you're being taken advantage of because you didn't clearly define the agreement, right? And so in that, whenever you leave your agreement open like that, you have to be willing to accept all of the outcomes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will feel like there's an imbalance, right? Because you're not clearly defining it.
And someone in the very beginning of this video said something about, you know, give unconditionally without expectation of return. I forget exactly how you said it. And that's an interesting, like, what makes it different, those who are able to do that and those who need to have clear agreements outlined. Do you know what I'm asking? There are some situations where you say, yeah, I'm just going to give unconditionally. And then there are some situations where you say, okay, there needs to be an exchange and a balanced energy here. Because you can value yourself and still give unconditionally without expectation of exchange. So what's the difference between those two? Does that make sense? Do you guys know what I'm asking? Maybe someone watching knows what I'm asking.
So you're wanting to understand the difference between giving unconditionally and giving conditionally? I mean, is that what the question is?
Yeah, kind of. I guess that's what I'm asking. But
like the condition.
When would you... Maybe it's more, when would you decide... Ellen, can you explain what I'm asking? When would you decide to say, okay, this is an unconditional gift I'm giving, I don't expect anything in return, and then there are times where maybe you feel taken advantage of when you haven't decided within yourself which it's going to be. Maybe that's...
Because this comes back to clearly defining your agreement. Yeah. Are you actually agreeing that you're giving unconditionally, or are you not?
So maybe it's actually an agreement you have to have with yourself first.
Yeah. I mean, these...
And maybe that's where I went wrong. I didn't have a clear...
Yeah.
This is what it's going to be. This is going to be an exchange situation, or this is going to be an unconditionally giving situation.
Right, because those are different experiences, right? So
yes, Adam.
So you can, you know, show up and give, you can show up and receive, and you can ask. That's where the asking comes in, right?
Yeah.
So there's giving, there's receiving, and there's asking. And so asking is with, you know, that experience of exchange.
I'm going to see if I can read Ellen's entire comment here.
And
okay.
Comes into honoring your value. and that sort of experience.
Yeah, Ellen brings up a good point. She says, I find if my heart asks me to give unconditionally in the moment, my energy will be balanced in another way, not by the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I don't know if I need to say anything more about that.
Right. And so to be clear on that, if you actually do feel the resonance to give or not, right? So that's the other thing where you might get into a pattern of thinking you should do something because it's,
because it felt good last time,
or you feel that you've built some sort of pattern of expectation of yourself or these other things, and to be very clear and of the moment in feeling that resonance. If the answer's no, then honor yourself in that no. Honor your no. Like, that's a big thing. Yeah, and that comes into not going into patterns of self-sacrifice to try and achieve harmony or balance, right?
And it also is, there's a big victim energy that can come in with this. Making yourself the victim if you do feel taken advantage of, instead of saying, okay, what can I do differently, or what do I need to look at within myself, or what patterns do I have? You can just keep playing out the victim role. And when you claim the victim role for yourself, you will continually feel like you're taken advantage of because you've claimed and allowed that role for yourself. Does that make sense? Yeah,
and even, whether others show up or not, they can position their perspective and interpretation of their experience to fill that opposing role to the victim, right?
Say a little more about that.
Well, even if it's something like the weather, right? So you could be victim to how the weather is outside and look at how the world's against me and now I can't go do this, and it's you can stir up anything to be the opposing to the victim if you are fully in that energy, right? Whereas you can just not go there if you don't engage with that pattern, right? You can just appreciate the experience as it is and choose what you choose because it resonates, and that's it. And
so
to give your power away.
Let's sum up
with
the topic of being taken advantage of. So it's about how you value yourself,
honoring what you feel, honoring your no, honoring your yes. Being clear with your agreements, whether you are giving, receiving, or asking. Right, clearly defining the nuances, being willing to accept all of the different outcomes. And
I would say honoring your agreement with yourself and with the people with whom you're interacting, if there are other people involved.
And not coming out of center with your agreements, right? That's a big thing.
So when you make an agreement with someone, they don't honor their end, but you honor your end. Staying centered with yourself.
Right, knowing that you showed up fully, and there's a balance of energy, whether it be from this person or from someone else.
I think that's what Ellen was saying earlier, is even if the agreement isn't met with that exact person, that there has to be a balance. There has to. We live in a polarity universe, so there has to be a balance. And we'll answer that question soon, Ellen. So if the other person doesn't keep their end of the agreement, if you show up fully, if you stay within your center, then that balance has to come, and maybe it comes from someone else and not that person.
And you'll know if you're in your center because you'll feel it.
Okay, so Ellen asked, what do you mean by coming out of your center with the agreement?
So, in a way, extending your vital energy into this condition of this agreement being fulfilled or not, right? And so there would be a experience of discomfort if it's not fulfilled because your energy is in it, right? Because you've extended yourself into this agreement, this part of your energy. And
you may feel an emotional trigger.
Right.
That may be a discomfort.
So you can go into, instead of accepting the other person being free and their choosing, you can go into experiences of anger or obviously victimhood, or you can go into all these other things instead of being free and in integrity with your energy. So it's a form of giving your power away, is another way of verbalizing. Giving your power away to the agreement rather than being centered and present regardless of what occurs, right?
Yeah. And I want to say this too before we end. As a giver, and I know a lot of you guys are givers, as a giver, one of the things that we tend to do is we do give unconditionally, but then when the energy starts to become imbalanced, like if we're not also good receivers, we can start to feel taken advantage of. And so we also have to be balanced with the receiving part. Like we have to learn how to be generous receivers as well, so that there is balance. I give a lot through videos, through free channeling videos, however it is that I give, doesn't matter. And if I don't clearly define to the universe what I need from the universe in order to stay balanced. Sorry, I'm thinking about this as this was not premeditated. Then I'm going to feel taken advantage of by people in my community. And they're just receiving. They're like, hey, she's doing a video. We're just going to take the information. Yeah. People will take as much as you allow them to. Whatever you have to give, people will take. And so if you get out of balance, then you need to put agreements in place as to how this giving and receiving interaction is going to work.
Yeah, the simplicity of it is if you're giving, someone's going to receive. That's what giving is.
Exactly. And so if it's not working for you to just give unconditionally, then maybe you put a price on what you're giving.
And that comes back to asking.
It comes back to asking. That comes back to valuing yourself.
So give with grace and gratitude, receive with grace and gratitude, and ask with grace and gratitude. Right?
And someone asked if we would do a video about unconditionally receiving. I don't know if I'm in a place of full integrity to do that yet. I'm still working on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm still working on that.
Okay.
I'm working on being a generous receiver.
Yeah. And so when we say unconditionally, that means there's no balancing of any. It's just you just express, and it's radiant, and you have. You still experience fulfillment because you're meeting that resonance, so that's the balance already. But to have a free and open flow of giving in that manner, which we've all experienced, just following your heart and giving because you feel that inspiration and it's fulfilling, right? The other side is receiving in that same manner, which can be a little more challenging because of self-judgment, issues of self-worth, of being okay to receive. And sometimes it helps to put in the context of, well, I'm receiving, so now I can give, right? That's the basic idea. If you receive things that support you having more free time, well, you have more free time now to help others. That's the simplicity of it. So to sometimes it assists in the process to contextualize it that receiving is serving your giving, right? Yeah,
but that's like a justification. Then you're like...
Right, but...
This is a whole other topic, though. Let's save this for another...
I'm saying as a stepping stone for the process, right? So once you get used to that idea, then take it to the next level, which is just to honor yourself as you honor others, right? So your unconditional giving, truly being unconditional, would be then honoring yourself as you honor others to truly receive in the same manner.
So are we on the unconditional receiving topic now, or
yes.
Are we on the... Okay, so we've changed the topic of the video. I just want to be clear where we are, because...
Right.
Okay.
Because we're talking about giving, receiving, and asking, and how that all the dynamics that play into being taken advantage of.
Okay, very good. but maybe we can do a whole other video about receiving, because it is somewhat related to this topic, but it also is, I like the suggestion.
I haven't agreed to that.
Oh my god. Alright, thanks for being with us today, you guys. Much love. We'll see you in the next video. Mwah.